Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place where the mind is as much a mystery as the stars overhead. You find yourself in the heart of a medieval village just before sunrise. The cobbled streets are still wet from the night's mist, the air filled with the heavy scent of wood smoke and damp wool. The first bells of morning begin to ring low, sonorous, and slightly off tune, and the sound echoes through narrow alleys like a warning. You're not just passing through. You've been sent here because something's off. You've been talking to yourself, maybe laughing at things no one else hears, or perhaps you've simply grown too quiet. Either way, eyes have followed you. And in this village, people don't understand minds that wander. They fear them. A woman grips her shawl tighter when you pass. A child whispers to another and points. Somewhere behind you, you hear someone mutter the word possessed. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where mental health is neither well understood nor gently treated. If you're lucky, they'll just call you touched. If you're not, well, let's just say you might find yourself sleeping on straw in the back of the chapel, or worse, locked in the cellar behind the baker's house. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Invite viewers to post their location and local time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander past the tiny church at the center of town. The priest there once gave a sermon warning that madness was contagious. It's not true, of course, not scientifically, but the idea's sticky. People cling to it like they cling to garlic charms or Saint Dymphna medallions, just in case. The truth is, no one really knows what's going on inside your head, but they do know fear. And in this era, fear often shapes policy. There's no such thing yet as a diagnosis. No anxiety, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia. There's only what the village sees and how far it's willing to let you go before it acts. A man named Joris used to walk these streets too. He sang to himself, smiled at birds wept without warning. He wasn't dangerous, but one day he walked barefoot into the church during Mass and knelt for 3 hours without blinking. The next day he was gone. No one talks about Joris anymore. His cottage sits abandoned ivy curling through its roof tiles. You're staying in a tiny rented room above a tanner's shop. The bed is lumpy, the blanket smells faintly of mold, and the noise of scraping hides rises through the floorboards at dawn. But it's safer than the streets. You're still just strange enough to be left alone, but not yet so strange that someone's petitioning the bishop about you. As you try to rest, your mind wanders to the oddities you've witnessed. A woman throwing herbs into a stream while chanting. A boy reciting prayers backward. A man selling potions made from boiled mice and clove. This isn't medicine, not really, but it's what people know. Because in this world, mental health is folded into superstition, religion, and fear. There's no line between the sacred and the sick. The smell of roasting meat wafts in through your window. It's morning now, and the village is stirring. A baker laughs too loudly. A goat bleats like it's arguing with itself. Somewhere, a bell rings twice, and that means someone's died. Maybe it's just age. Maybe it was the fever. But sometimes it's despair. People vanish here. Not always physically, but mentally. And once they drift too far, they rarely return. The village healer, an old woman with twisted fingers and a surprisingly sharp tongue, once whispered that too much thinking could rot the soul. That's not an uncommon belief. Too much time alone, too many dreams, too much imagination. It's dangerous. People believe the devil finds his favorite tools in the idle minds of melancholics. Scholars remain divided on whether medieval villagers truly believed all mental illness stemmed from spiritual corruption or whether that's a modern misreading of old church records. But here in this village, under these fog-draped rooftops, there's no such nuance. If your mind breaks, it's either punishment or possession. That's it. You pass a shrine to Saint Dymphna on your way back from the well. She's the unofficial patron of disturbed minds. Her story. She fled her mad father and was eventually murdered for her resistance. But over time, pilgrims with troubled minds began visiting her burial place, hoping for relief. You mutter a quick prayer to her, just in case. A rooster crows. Another joins in off-key. You think you hear someone sobbing in the distance, but no one else reacts. The air is damp again, heavy with the weight of thoughts no one dares to voice aloud. Sleep tugs at your shoulders. Your feet ache. You're not sure if you feel safe, or if that word even has meaning here. But the bells have stopped, and for now at least, no one is watching you. You lie down in your scratchy cot and try not to dream. The next morning greets you not with peace but with tension, like the village itself is holding its breath. Fog clings to the thatched rooftops, curling into alleyways like spectral fingers. You stretch your arms and feel the stiffness of sleeping on a lumpy mattress. And for a moment you wonder if the heaviness in your chest is just sleep or something darker. You head down into the tannery's yard, where the air is thick with the stench of boiled urine and hide. The tanner doesn't greet you. He just nods eyes, flicking over you the way one checks a leaky barrel. Not unkind, but not curious either. In a place like this, keeping to yourself is a kind of currency. You wander toward the market square, where a commotion has gathered near the well. A girl, perhaps 12, sits in the dust, rocking slowly, her eyes distant and her mouth moving without sound. Her mother stands nearby, pleading with the priest, who looks grim and exhausted. She's not possessed, the mother insists. She's just lost. But possession is the first conclusion here. It's the safest explanation for the frightened. If something unseeable causes the mind to change, it must be a devil, a curse, or a punishment. And so begins the ritual blessed salt holy water prayers in Latin. The girl flinches at the water's touch. She's not screaming or seizing, just humming. But that's enough. Within hours she'll be taken behind church doors where none may enter unless they carry scripture or authority. You linger by the edge of the crowd, heart tugging. It's all too familiar. You remember your own still moments. The nights when the world bent sideways and sounds felt too sharp. But you never hummed in public. You learned to keep your oddness folded tight like an old letter tucked in a shoe. This is how mental health is treated here. Not with understanding, but with ritual. The diagnosis is supernatural, the cure is spiritual, and the consequences are often brutal. Whisper 1 in the comments below if this tale charms your heart, or 2 if it sends shivers down your spine. In the tavern that night, the story spreads like spilled wine. They say the girl bit her own hand, that she spoke in tongues, that she floated. None of it's likely, but truth is a feeble match for fear. You sip a lukewarm ale and listen. No one mentions her name anymore. She's already becoming a myth. And myths are powerful here. You leave the tavern before dusk and walk the narrow road back to your room. A boy runs past you holding a bundle of herbs, chanting something about protection. A woman nails a tiny mirror above her door. She believes it reflects evil spirits. Maybe it does. Maybe she sleeps better thinking so. In this world, belief itself is half the medicine. As the stars emerge, you glance up. The moon is nearly full-fat pale, and slightly smug, as if it knows what's coming. People here speak of lunacy from Luna, the moon, and believe that its light stirs madness in the weak of mind. Some villagers won't go out on nights like this. Others clutch their rosaries tighter. You, of course, go walking. The fields stretch silent and soft beyond the village walls. You pass a scarecrow missing one arm. Its crooked silhouette looks almost like it's waving or warning. You breathe deeply. Out here, away from the hearths and holy water, your thoughts feel less caged. More yours. Experts still debate whether the concept of possession was genuinely believed by most medieval people, or whether it was primarily a control mechanism used by clergy and rulers to explain the unexplainable and maintain order. What's clear, though, is that belief held power both for those wielding it and those suffering under it. You kneel in the grass, pluck a dandelion and blow. The seeds scatter into the night, each one a tiny traveller. You wonder what the girl from the well is doing now. If she's afraid. If she even understands what's happening to her. Back in your room, the candle flickers low. You lie on your side, listening to the creak of wood and the far-off bark of dogs. You're still a visitor here, still hidden behind layers of normal. But for how long you dream of a sky where the stars rearrange themselves into unfamiliar constellations. Of laughter that turns into crying. Of a girl humming in the dark. Morning comes with a knock. 3 hard raps at your door, too rhythmic to be random. You open it to find a man in a red hood, bright against the dreary, thatch-grey world. He's a messenger from the town clerk who wants to know if you've seen anything unusual. A word so vague it loops endlessly in your mind. Unusual, like walking barefoot, like talking to birds, like thinking too much. You shake your head and offer a muttered denial. The man stares a beat too long, then walks away. His boots leave muddy ovals that look like paw prints. You wonder who else he's visited, who else is being watched. Outside, you follow the path past the herb, Seller's hut. She's hunched over her stall hands, moving quickly, as she ties small bundles of dried valerian sage and yarrow. For calming the blood, she mutters when you pause to look. Too much heat here, she taps her temple, and a person can lose their name. You buy a satchel of valerian root even though you can't afford it, and she gives you a nod that feels more like a warning than thanks. This, in many ways, is what counts as treatment in your world. Plants, smokes, mumbled charms. But beneath it all lies a structure, a belief system rooted in the theory of the four humours. You've heard the words before: blood phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. According to medieval physicians, your mental state is just a symptom of imbalance. Too much black bile, that's melancholy. Too much yellow bile, you're choleric, angry, aggressive. Phlegm makes you sluggish. Blood makes you overly jovial, maybe even manic. It's laughably oversimplified now, but back then this system shaped everything from diet to medical treatment. You've met men who were bled once a month like clockwork to balance their excess. Others were told to eat only cold foods. One woman was fed a potion made of crushed pearls to cool her brain. You once asked a young friar if any of this ever worked. He shrugged and said, "Sometimes the patient stops crying." That counts, doesn't it? The jury's out on how seriously physicians themselves took humoral theory versus how much it was used simply because it offered some kind of answer, any answer. But in the absence of modern understanding, even flawed systems have a strange comfort. You reach the town's public garden, where a few elderly men sit playing a slow, silent game with dice and carved pebbles. One of them has a red birthmark that stretches across his forehead like a crescent. They nod as you pass. You wonder what stories they've lived through, who among them saw a brother vanish behind monastery walls, or a daughter start speaking in riddles only to be married off to a farmer far away. In this world, people don't use words like trauma or depression. They say someone's humour is spoiled, that their spirit is unwell, that they have the shadow. A particularly quiet woman might be called moonbitten. A loud, erratic man is said to be fire-ruled. You begin to see it for what it is, a vocabulary for suffering even if the meanings are wrong. You stop at the stream squat on its mossy bank and stare at your reflection in the gently warped water. You look normal. But then so did Joris, until the day he sang to a tree for 4 straight hours. It's not about looking strange. It's about behaving wrong at the wrong moment. The breeze picks up. Leaves rustle like whispers in the canopy above. A bird lands near you, pecks at a worm, and flies away. Simple. Untroubled. You envy it. You remember a story told to you by a weaver's apprentice. His sister used to sit by the hearth and stare at the flames for hours. One day she said they spoke to her. The family called the priest. By nightfall she was gone, taken to a nunnery known for housing women with delicate minds. Whether she was helped or hidden, well, that's another matter. You head back as dusk paints the sky with muted pinks and ash-grey streaks. The bells toll again. One short, one long. Someone's been born. Someone's died. The world balances itself, apparently. That night your dreams are slippery and strange. In them, you are the herb seller, the girl at the well, the bird. Each dream ends with you whispering the same word, balance. But when you wake, you feel anything but. You wake to rain. Not a dramatic storm, but the slow, soaking kind that seeps into every crevice and turns the thatch above your bed into a cold sponge. Droplets plink into a metal basin beside you, irregular and loud like an offbeat drum. You lie there a while, unsure if the heaviness you feel is the damp or something more internal. Eventually you rise, wrap your shawl tight and venture out. The streets are half empty. Just a few market folk braving the drizzle hoods up, shoulders hunched. You duck into the church, not to pray necessarily, but to stay dry. It smells of wet wool and candle smoke. The air's warmer here, and faintly sweet, like old incense and dried petals. The priest is at the altar, muttering Latin. You recognize the rhythm but not the meaning. A few pews away, an older woman rocks gently, eyes closed. She murmurs the same prayer over and over, fingers trembling on her rosary. You sit quietly, pretending to do the same, but your mind is drifting. The stories you've heard of madness in this place blur together, demons, humours, spirits, sin. But there's another explanation that creeps through the cracks of all of them. The moon. Yes, the moon. It sounds silly now, but in this time many people genuinely believe the moon affects the mind. The term lunatic comes from luna, the Latin word for moon. During full moons, the village healer closes her shutters and locks her door, claiming too much moonlight can stir the black bile. You've seen others do stranger things, walking in circles, talking to trees, howling like wolves. Of course, the science isn't there. Modern thinkers debate whether lunar phases really had any effect, or if that's just centuries of coincidence stacked on top of superstition. Still, the belief is powerful. Powerful enough that on full moon nights the jailer double-checks the bolts and the midwives sleep with iron shears under their pillows. You glance out the stained glass window. The rain has softened to mist the sky to dull silver. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, 2 slow rings this time. Likely a funeral. You've begun to notice that burials here are quiet. No wailing, no speeches, just soft earth and quick goodbyes. Grief like madness is something to be tucked away. You wander out of the church and find yourself at the edge of the village cemetery. Small crooked stones lean at odd angles, moss-covered and nameless. A few have symbols, crosses, circles, runes. One has a crudely scratched moon. Tap 3 in the comments below if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled. A man stands by a fresh grave, hat in hand. He says nothing, just stares. You almost don't see the boy beside him, pale, listless, clutching a small wooden toy. The man murmurs something to the boy, then guides him away. You hear just one word as they pass: fever. Whether he means illness of the body or the mind, you can't tell. Maybe both. You walk on toward the edge of the village where the land slopes gently upward. There's a windmill up there abandoned. They say the miller who once lived in it began to see too much. He wrote symbols on the walls, carved eyes into every surface. When they found him, he was curled in a corner, whispering to the beams. Some said it was possession. Others said it was grief he'd lost his wife and never spoke again. The truth probably doesn't matter anymore. The windmill still creaks on stormy nights. Scholars still debate whether stories like the miller's reflect actual mental illness or serve more as cultural warnings: behave or be deemed mad. Either way, the outcome is isolation. You think of all the lonely corners of this world: windmills, cellars, shrines. So many places to hide people and their pain. Back in your room, you brew a weak tea from the valerian you bought. It smells like damp socks but tastes calming. You sit at the window watching rain roll down the glass, wondering how much of what's called madness is simply pain without a name. You wrap your blanket tighter and close your eyes. The dream returns, the girl at the well humming. But this time she turns to look at you. Her eyes are calm, not haunted, just tired. By midday, the clouds begin to part, and with the light comes noise. The marketplace hums with cautious energy, stalls reopening like flowers in the sun. You weave through the narrow lanes, passing vendors hawking onions, flax and dried fish that smells of brine and mothballs. Life, at least on the surface, resumes. But you know what lingers behind the baskets and smiles the village's quiet shadow, those who don't quite fit, who drift at the edge of ritual and rhythm. And as you walk, you spot one. He's sitting near the fountain, legs crossed, humming tunelessly into a bundle of cloth. His hair is wild, tangled with straw, and he rocks ever so slightly as he speaks to the bundle, not to people. A few children giggle, then scatter when their mothers scold them. No one bothers him. No one helps him either. His name is Willem. He's not dangerous, just forgotten. Once, years ago, he served as a thatcher. They say a fall from the roof cracked something in his head, and he began to talk to shadows. Now he's a fixture, like the crooked sign above the blacksmith shop or the chipped statue of St. Elmo near the well. In this village, Willem is mad, a word stretched to cover everything from grief to head trauma to quiet resistance. He's not tied up. He's not locked away. He's simply outside, unhoused, unspoken to, untouchable. You sit beside him for a while. He doesn't acknowledge you, but he doesn't flinch either. The cloth bundle in his hands has eyes drawn on it in charcoal, 2 dots and a curved line, a face. He hums a lullaby to it. You listen. This is what it looks like when the mind is allowed to break without being punished, just abandoned. Medieval society had no centralized institution for mental care, especially outside large cities. Instead, people like Willem fell into familial care, or were left to beg, wander, or be absorbed into religious communities. If their behavior was mild enough, they might be tolerated. If it was loud or dangerous, they were more likely to be restrained, cast out, or worse. You watch a passerby drop a crust of bread near Willem without looking at him. He picks it up with reverence like it's gold. Then he offers half to the bundle. You look away. Experts remain divided on whether such individuals were perceived with pity, fear, or outright disdain. The truth likely varied depending on the time, place, and temperament of the community. But in this village, silence seems to be the default. You leave the square and wander uphill to a small cluster of homes near the old orchard. There, tucked between ivy-covered walls, is a cottage everyone avoids. The door hangs askew. The shutters are nailed shut. Local whispers say it belonged to a woman named Agnes, once known for her herbal knowledge and then for her sudden fits. Some say she was a witch. Others say she simply wept too loudly and too often. When her husband died, she stopped eating. When her son drowned, she began muttering to herself. She refused the priest's visits, refused medicine, refused the prayers. So they stopped coming. She vanished one winter. The house has been empty since. You press your hand to the doorframe, its wood soft with rot. Inside it smells of dust and dried herbs. There's a cracked bowl on the table, and a strip of linen still hung like a curtain over the hearth. The place feels paused, not abandoned, but waiting. You imagine Agnes sitting here, staring into the fire, muttering names the world no longer cared to remember. And you wonder how many were like her. In the official records, very few. Mental illness, as we define it today, didn't often make it into written history, unless it disrupted power, challenged religious authority, or became too loud to ignore. Most suffering was private, domestic, or quietly buried. You step outside and let the door fall shut behind you. The orchard's trees have long gone wild branches, curled like claws toward the sun. A bird shrieks overhead and startles you, but when you look up, it's gone. Just wind in the leaves. As you walk back to town, your feet feel heavy. The road curves past the church again, and you hear someone inside singing softly an unfamiliar hymn in a wavering voice. It might be the girl from the well, or someone else entirely. At this point, the line between the sane and the other seems thinner than ever. You reach your door just as the sun begins to drop. The sky is awash in faded gold, and the bells are quiet for once. You pause, breathing in the scent of damp stone and far-off cooking smoke. Tonight the dreams will come again. You feel them gathering already just at the edge of thought. The candlelight wavers as you awaken in the middle of the night, unsure of what stirred you. A creaking floorboard, a breath of wind, or just your own restless thoughts turning somersaults in your mind. You sit up slowly, pulling the blanket close, and listen. Nothing, just the quiet shifting of old wood and the distant murmur of someone snoring through thin walls. You've been here long enough now to notice who disappears. There was a young monk who used to come through the square every market day. Thin, always barefoot face blotched with sunburn. He carried a wooden bowl, whispered blessings, and walked in wide loops as if avoiding something only he could see. Last week he stopped coming. You ask around. The tanner shrugs. The baker waves a hand. But the herb seller, who rarely says much, finally mutters, he was taken back to the priory. Lost his silence, poor boy. Which in monk speak means he broke. Couldn't keep up the quiet. Maybe he shouted at the altar. Maybe he laughed during a funeral. It doesn't take much. You decide to visit the priory the next day. It's not far, just over the hill past a row of linden trees. The path is steep and muddy, and by the time you arrive your boots are soaked through and your knees ache. The priory is modest, as most are simple stone walls, heavy doors, a few chickens pecking freely at the edges of the cloister. A monk greets you with a tight smile and guides you inside. You pretend to be searching for a cousin. A lie, but a harmless one. You just want to see. Inside, the air is cool and scented faintly with wax and lavender. The corridors echo with every step. You pass rooms filled with prayer, with copying, with silence. Then you see them, two monks sitting quietly by a window. One is reading, the other is staring. Not out the window, not at anything in particular, just inward. His eyes flicker now and then, but his body is still. The reader doesn't look up. You realize quickly, this is how the priory handles what the village cannot. Quiet containment. No chains, no fire, no rituals, just solitude. This is melancholia in its quietest form. During the medieval period, especially within monasteries, melancholia was recognized, at least in a rudimentary sense. It was tied to spiritual despair, a condition described in religious texts as acedia. Monks suffering from it were said to lose motivation, abandon prayer, even fall into a kind of numb paralysis. Some believed it to be a test from God. Others whispered of demonic distraction. Scholars remain divided on whether acedia was a distinct mental illness or a socially acceptable label for burnout, isolation, or depression among monastics. What's clear is that it was dangerous. Not because it harmed others, but because it eroded purpose. And in a cloister without purpose, what are you? You wander the priory grounds and find a small herb garden behind the chapel. Lavender, rosemary, feverfew, all carefully tended. A young novice offers you a sprig of lemon balm. It helps the troubled, he says, not meeting your eyes. You thank him and tuck it into your belt. By late afternoon, you make your way back to the village feet, dragging thoughts slow. The idea of a life spent in whispered despair follows you like a second shadow. At least Willem gets to hum. Back in town, the square is busy again. A travelling juggler has drawn a crowd. You pause to watch him toss 3 apples and a torch. Children laugh. Someone claps off beat. And for a few moments, everything feels light. But then you see a figure watching from the alley, the girl from the well. Her hair is unbrushed. Her dress slightly torn. She's still humming. You wonder how long she'll be allowed to linger. That night, you light your candle early and steep the lemon balm in hot water. The smell is gentle, grassy. You sip slowly, sitting by the window watching stars appear one by one. You think about the monk who stared at nothing, about Agnes's empty house, about the strange hush that falls over the village when certain names are spoken. And then you think about how none of them ever truly left. They just slipped out of rhythm, out of sight. You blow out the candle and climb into bed. Your dreams return. This time you're in the priory copying a manuscript. The letters move as you write them. They rearrange themselves into strange shapes and names you don't recognize. In the corner of your eye, the monk who stares blinks once and smiles. You wake with ink on your fingers, or at least it feels that way. You rub your thumb and forefinger together, half expecting to find smudges from the dream manuscript still there. But it's only the cold morning air clinging to your skin like residue from another life. Breakfast is a crust of bread and a wedge of hard cheese left from yesterday. You chew slowly, staring at the ceiling. There are spiderwebs in the corners, fine glimmering threads, where dust has gathered undisturbed. You think of the priory again. The quiet monk with the vacant gaze, the strange smile, and for a moment you envy him. Not his silence, but his detachment. The freedom of unknowing. You step outside, just as the church bell rings once. Not a call to prayer, just a marker of time. The village is quieter today. Damp again. Clouds low and brooding. A group of women cluster around the well, muttering. You catch a few phrases, visions, saints calling miracles, and a name, Breeder. You don't recognize it at first, but as you draw closer, you realize they're talking about the girl, the one from the well. They say she's begun to speak again, but only in rhyme, and only when the moon is visible. She's claimed to see angels, claimed to know when the next frost will come. Some laugh. Others glance over their shoulders and cross themselves. The line between madness and mysticism is razor thin here. One step to the left and you're touched by God. One step to the right, and you're marked by the devil. Breeder's mother appears clutching a handful of rosemary and pacing, muttering something about taking her daughter to the bishop. He'll know what's real, she says, as though any of this is measurable. You stay out of sight, listening. In the Middle Ages, visions and voices could go either way. If you were poor, female, and inconvenient, they were usually a sign of madness, or worse, witchcraft. But if your visions were helpful, or if you had the right connections, you might be seen as chosen. People like Saint Hildegard, who saw strange lights and heard divine music, were celebrated, canonized even. Others, like Marjorie Kempe, were laughed at, feared, or silenced. Saint or suffering soul. Experts still debate whether many medieval mystics were truly revered in their time, or only later retroactively polished into sainthood, and how many others like Breeder were simply young, vulnerable, and lost in a world with few explanations. You walk past the group at the well, and into the woods beyond the village. The trees are dense here, their branches bare and claw-like. It's a good place to be alone, to think, or not think. The path winds downward toward a trickling stream that's half frozen in the shade. You crouch near the water, cupping some into your palm. It tastes like earth, sharp and clean. As you sit, you recall a tale an old shepherd once told you, of a woman who wandered the forest in her sleep, led by voices only she could hear. By morning she would return covered in frost, humming lullabies in a language no one knew. They built her a small hut near the edge of the village, fed her bread and broth, and waited. After 5 winters she stopped returning. Some said the forest took her, Others said the saints called her home. You hear a bird call above sharp, sudden. Then silence again. Back in the village, Breda is gone. Her mother's stall is closed. The rosemary bundles are still hanging, but they've begun to dry and brown at the edges. No one mentions her name this time. You ask the herb seller carefully. She just shakes her head. When the light comes from the wrong place, you don't chase it, she says cryptically. You close the shutters. You pass Willem again near the fountain. He's added a second face to his cloth bundle. This one has tears. That night you sit by your candle and write your own rhyme. Just a few lines, not meant for anyone. But the rhythm feels familiar, soothing. You fold the paper and hide it beneath the floorboard. The dreams that follow are filled with music, strange echoing chords, and a voice that sounds like Breda's calling your name from beneath the church floor. By morning, the dreams feel less like sleep and more like memory. You carry them with you, Breda's voice, the hum beneath the church, the icy hush of the woods. They ride along your thoughts as you dress, eat and step outside. It's market day again, but the square feels off like a stage missing its main actor. Breda's absence has left a hole and people fill it with whispers. Some say she was taken to the bishop in the next town. Others claim she was sent to a convent. A few think she simply wandered off into the forest following her visions. No one agrees. No one dares to ask too loudly. You stop by the baker's for a roll. He barely looks up as he hands it to you. Shame about the girl, he mutters, then adds. Best to leave such things to the priests. You nod, because that's the safest response. Later that day, you head toward the edge of town where the smokehouses stand. You've heard rumors about a new healer in the area, someone from beyond the forest who uses unusual methods. You find her in a low, crooked hut with bones tied to the rafters and bundles of dried herbs hanging like strange, papery fruit. She's younger than you expected, dark-eyed, wiry, quick. She offers you a drink before you even speak. It smells like burned thyme and vinegar. You sip. It's awful. I've seen your kind, she says almost cheerfully. The ones who look too long at shadows. The ones who hear what others miss. You say nothing. They try to beat it out, don't they? The sadness. The fire. Whatever it is. She pulls a thin leather pouch from her belt and opens it. Inside crushed lavender pine resin and something that looks suspiciously like soot. This, she says, is for the fire. She gives you a pinch of it in a folded cloth. You'll know when. Whether she's a charlatan, a wise woman, or just another lost soul is impossible to say. But her words stay with you. In the Middle Ages, treatments for mental distress ranged from curious to cruel. Beyond the priests and physicians, there were midwives, herbalists, and cunning folk who used folk remedies, smoke rituals, and whispered incantations. Some believed in the curative power of sleep. Others turned to smokehouses filled with pungent herbs burning juniper, mugwort, or myrrh to choke out the devil. You remember hearing of a method called fumigation, a treatment involving thick, choking smoke intended to force evil spirits out of the body. In one case, recorded centuries later, a man was locked in a room with burning sulfur. He survived, but didn't speak again. The line between treatment and punishment was often thin and sometimes non-existent. Scholars remain divided on how much these cures were truly believed to help versus how often they served to isolate, scare, or even punish those who behaved abnormally. What's known is that fear of the unknown often fueled the harshest responses. As you walk back into town, with the cloth pouch tucked safely into your pocket, you notice the bell tower has been freshly washed. That usually only happens before a feast day or after an exorcism. You can't help but wonder which it is this time. The rest of the day passes in a blur of grey. The clouds never fully part. The air stays heavy, metallic as though charged. You see fewer people on the streets. The tavern is quieter than usual. Willem's missing from his post by the fountain. You look for him just in case, but he's nowhere. Back in your room, you unfold the cloth and study the powdered mix. You don't know what you expected. Sparks light answers. Instead, it just smells like forest floor and regret. You sprinkle a bit near the hearth. The smoke curls upward, soft, lazy grey. It doesn't choke. It doesn't cleanse. It just is. You lie down again, the taste of vinegar still faint on your tongue. You imagine Breda somewhere chanting her rhymes into the trees barefoot and clear-eyed. That night no dreams come, just silence. The quiet continues the next day, so thick it almost buzzes. Even the birds seem reluctant to speak. You wake early and step outside just as the sun begins to stretch over the rooftops. The village looks muted, like the color's been drained out of it. Or maybe your eyes are just tired. Lately you've been feeling everything more sharply. The roughness of your blanket, the weight of stairs, the ache that wraps around your ribs like a too-tight belt. The fountain gurgles softly, but Willem's still gone. His absence leaves the square unbalanced, as if the village has misplaced something and is too proud to admit it. You walk to the church again, not to pray but to observe. The door creaks open with a sigh. Inside, a low chant echoes through the stone nave. 3 women kneel near the altar. Behind them stands a man in a dark robe, not the usual village priest, but someone newer, sterner. You notice a thick iron ring of keys hanging at his waist. They've brought someone forward. A man, pale, thin, knees shaking as he kneels. His eyes dart back and forth, unfocused. He mutters to himself, lips cracked and twitching. You recognize him vaguely. A farmer's son. He once sold eggs at the market. Now he's whispering to someone invisible. The priest begins the rite. Latin rolls from his tongue like cold water down stone. One woman holds a wooden cross. Another clutches a vial of oil. You back into the shadows, heart pounding. It's not fear of the ritual, it's fear of what they believe they're curing. The man is clearly unwell, but instead of rest, he gets holy water and shouted scripture. Instead of comfort, he gets fire. In medieval Europe, one of the most common responses to mental illness was exorcism. Possession was the working diagnosis for almost anything unexplainable. Fits, catatonia, hallucinations, mutism. A person who screamed at night or laughed during a funeral could be labelled infested. The rites varied. Some were gentle, involving prayers and blessings. Others were far harsher, involving restraint, fasting, and sometimes even beatings. The goal wasn't healing. It was driving something out. You watch as the priest presses a crucifix to the man's forehead. He doesn't scream. He doesn't convulse. He just weeps soft, soundless tears. That seems to unsettle the priest more than if he had raged. Scholars remain divided on whether most of these so-called possessions were genuine episodes of mental illness, trauma, responses, or moments of neurological conditions like epilepsy. Many records don't distinguish between the three. And the sufferers. They were treated based on how convincingly they performed their affliction. You slip out before the final bell rings. The image of the man's trembling shoulders burned into your mind. Outside, you follow the sound of hammering to the edge of the village. A new scaffold is being erected just for repairs, supposedly, but its skeletal form casts long, spindly shadows across the muddy road. You pass a group of children playing a game of devil's court. One plays the possessed, another the priest. They chant and laugh, mock crying and flailing. You don't join in, you just watch. Back at the tanner's shop, your landlord tells you someone was found wandering the woods last night. Naked, shivering teeth, chattering prayers. The villagers don't know what to do with him. He's resting in the goat barn until a cleric arrives. Maybe he was drunk, the tanner says with a shrug. Or maybe the devil's bored. That's the trouble here. There's always a supernatural reason. Never grief. Never trauma. Never illness of the mind, only illness of the soul. You return to your room and light the last stub of your candle. It sputters like it wants to object. You pull out the herb pouch again and shake the last bit into the fire. It flares for a moment, then settles into a whispering crackle. You lie on your cot, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the farmer's son, of Breda, of the monk in the priory, of all the people who were told they weren't themselves when in fact they were simply breaking. Your last thought before sleep is that no one here wants to fix you. They just want you back in line. The sky is unusually clear today, almost too blue for comfort. It feels like the world is trying to pretend yesterday didn't happen. But you remember the priest's voice echoing through the nave, the farmer's son weeping, the ring of keys swinging like a threat. You walk slowly through the village feet, dragging through muddy ruts and frost-hardened grass. Everything feels slightly off-kilter, as though the streets are tilted at a strange angle only you can sense. Past the chapel, past the fountain, past the empty stall, where Breda's mother once sold rosemary bundles, you find yourself drawn to the outskirts. There, where the last of the houses taper into farmland, stands a crooked little hut with smoke curling from its chimney. A low wooden sign outside reads, "Protections, Readings, Cures." You've heard of this place. Not run by clergy, not run by a healer. This one belongs to a charm seller. You step inside and are immediately hit by a wall of scent-sour herbs, beeswax, burnt feathers. The woman who greets you is old, but not in the traditional way. Her eyes are bright and sharp, her nails long and stained green from grinding plants. She grins at you as though she already knows your secrets. "Looking to be protected?" she asks. "Or looking to be explained?" You hesitate. She laughs. "Don't worry. The mad ones always ask silently." She offers you a chair near a smoky brazier and hands you a carved token, a tiny figure made of salt and wax. "Keeps your mind tight," she explains. "Stops the soul from slipping out during dreams." In medieval folklore, charms and talismans were frequently used to ward off madness. People believed the mind could be invaded by spirits, by witches, by moonlight itself. So they wore iron amulets, rings etched with runes, even teeth from animals that were thought to never sleep. You examine the charm. It's warm in your hand, slightly greasy but comforting in a strange way. You tuck it into your cloak. The woman tells you that some minds are thinner than others, that certain people were born with a crack. Not a flaw exactly, just a weakness in the walls between thoughts. She says it like she's describing a type of weather. There's something kind about her, though. Her words are strange. She offers you a vial of vinegar, laced with thistle and bellflower. To anchor you, she says. You take it unsure why. Experts still debate whether folk remedies like these were acts of compassion, manipulation, or simply the only tools people had. In many cases, they were passed down in whispers, often from woman to woman. Some may have worked by accident. Many herbs do have calming effects. Others were pure ritual symbolic comfort in a cruel world. You ask her quietly if she's ever treated someone like Breda. She nods. Many, she says. They're often the ones closest to something we've forgotten how to name. Before you leave, she presses a bundle of cloth into your hand. Burn this when the dreams get too loud. You don't ask what's inside. As you walk back through the village, a young boy passes you, holding a charm just like yours. He's singing to himself off-key. His mother walks a few paces behind, eyes tired but kind. She doesn't hush him. You reach your room and set the charm on your windowsill. It stares back at you with its lopsided wax face. The thistle vinegar smells awful, but you sip it anyway. It tastes like rusted herbs and wood smoke. That night you don't dream, not exactly. Instead you drift through a heavy, soundless dark. But before waking, you catch a glimpse of something Willem standing at the fountain again. Only this time he's holding two bundles, one in each hand, rocking them both. His eyes meet yours. He smiles. Today you visit a place no one speaks of openly, the asylum. It's not called that, of course. The villagers refer to it as the house at the far field, or where the silence lives. You've passed it before at a distance, half hidden by hedges ivy strangling its stone walls, windows small and barred like a forgotten kennel. Today you decide to see it up close. You cross the frost-stiff field boots crunching against frozen grass. The wind here is colder, sharper, as if the air itself knows something isn't right. No one follows you. No one tries to stop you. The asylum is surrounded by a low stone wall topped with rusted nails. It's more symbolic than secure. You step through a crooked gate that groans like an old man waking from a nightmare. Inside the yard is nearly empty. Just a wooden bench, some leafless shrubs, and a woman rocking in a chair with no rhythm. Her hair is thin, wiry. Her eyes are closed, but her lips move as if reciting a poem only she remembers. A thin man in a grey robe greets you. He's not clergy, not a physician, just a keeper. He doesn't ask why you're here. Maybe he sees it in your eyes. He walks you through the house with practiced calm. The building smells of cold porridge and old straw. The walls are bare stone damp at the corners. One room has straw mats and thick ropes neatly coiled in the corner. Another has scratches on the door frame, deep, uneven, layered over years. You're not sure whether the people here are sick, traumatized, simply misunderstood, or all three. You see a man staring at a wall as if it holds the answer to a question no one asked. A woman cradling a pile of rocks like a baby. A teenager who won't stop blinking. There are no doctors, no potions, no prayers, just containment. Welcome to Bedlam, or at least its rural cousin. In medieval Europe, especially in urban centres like London, some early institutions existed to house the mad. The most infamous of these was Bethlehem Royal Hospital Bedlam, which by the late Middle Ages had become more a prison than a place of healing. Conditions were often brutal, chaining isolation, public displays. Some patients were treated like sideshow entertainment for the curious wealthy. Scholars remain divided on whether these early asylums ever truly aimed at treatment or merely served as a civic convenience, a place to put those who disrupted the delicate script of everyday life. A pressure valve for society's discomfort with suffering it couldn't explain. You pause in a hallway and press your fingers to the stone. It's cool, almost moist. A child's voice echoes faintly from somewhere singing, or maybe just practicing a vowel. The keeper finally speaks. Some leave, he says, when they're quiet enough. Then he adds, as if by reflex, quiet is good. You want to ask if anyone has ever come back from this place. Not just physically, but fully. But instead, you nod and thank him. He offers you a hard biscuit before you go. You pocket it without thinking. As you step back into the daylight, you feel its warmth more acutely than usual. The sun doesn't care who was locked inside. It shines on everything, field wall rocking woman alike. Back in the village, no one asks where you've been. But the tanner watches you a little longer than usual. You wonder if your face has changed. That evening you take out the wax charm and set it near the hearth again. Its little melted grin feels more mocking now. You stare at it and think, if they decide you belong in that house, no charm will save you. The dreams return, but they're different. No music, no voices. Just the house in the field, its windows blank and black. And in the doorway stands Breda, older, taller, silent. She's holding the key. The wind changes. It's subtle at first, less the sound of leaves and more the weight of silence between them. You notice it when you wake, when the birds stay hidden and the candle won't light on the first try. Something is shifting, as if the village itself is bracing for a story it doesn't want to hear again. You decide to visit the chapel less out of faith and more out of necessity. Something about the smell of wax and damp stone helps you think. Or maybe it just helps you forget. You slip into a back pew, head down. Near the altar, a priest you don't recognize kneels in stillness. He's not praying, he's just quiet, watching the light filter through the stained glass window, as if trying to decode a message hidden in the reds and blues. Behind you, someone clears their throat. You turn to find a man standing in the aisle, shoulders, hunched eyes rimmed in red. His clothes are fine, but creased and dusty like he's travelled hard. He asks, voice barely above a whisper, whether the priest is still hearing confessions for sorrow. You blink. It's a strange phrase, but you nod. He walks forward, kneels and begins to speak. Not loudly, not clearly, but you catch pieces. Words like emptiness, thoughts at night, wishing not to wake. He's not confessing a sin. He's confessing despair. In medieval thought, deep sadness, especially prolonged spiritual sadness, was often treated like a moral failing. If you felt hopeless, it was because your soul had grown lazy. Acedia, they called it. Sloth of the spirit. Dangerous. Contagious. To despair was to lose faith, and to lose faith was to risk damnation. So confession became the treatment, not because it cured anything, but because it cleaned the soul. In theory, you hear the priest offer gentle words in response. But there's a tension in his voice, as if he's repeating a script more than offering comfort. The man nods, stands, and walks out without a glance at you. Scholars still debate whether this form of confession ever truly helped those suffering from what we'd now call depression or suicidal ideation, or whether it merely pushed them further into shame. In monasteries, monks who confessed acedia were sometimes isolated, assigned longer prayers or told to fast. They were reminded that despair was a sin, which of course made them feel worse. You slip out soon after and walk aimlessly through the village. The sky is low and flat. The air smells of smoke and damp earth. At the well, two women argue quietly about someone's disappearance. "You only catch the end of it," said he walked into the river like it was a road. You keep walking. Eventually your feet take you to the riverbank. It's sluggish today, brown and thick, dragging leaves and small branches. You sit on a fallen log and stare at the water. You've had the thought, haven't you? Not walking into the river exactly, but just stepping away, quietly, like the others, letting the fog take you, letting the world move on without asking you to catch up. You reach into your pocket and find the charm again. It's sticky now, the wax softening. The salt has begun to crumble. It smells faintly like rosemary and regret. You wonder what people did before the charm sellers, before the monks, before the smoke and the bells and the exorcisms. Did they just walk into the trees and not come back? Did they dig shallow caves and live like ghosts? Or did they talk to someone? You close your eyes and imagine the farmer's son, Breda, Willem, Agnes, the woman who stared at rocks, the man in the chapel, all of them carrying something too large for one body and no place to put it. That night you don't light a candle. You sit in the dark and let the quiet settle around you like a cloak. You whisper into the silence, not a prayer, not a confession, just your name, to remind yourself you're still here. You wake before dawn, startled, not by a noise but by the feeling that someone was watching you in your sleep. You lie still, eyes fixed on the rafters, listening for a breath that isn't yours. But the room is empty. Just the soft rustle of the wind outside, and a drip of water from the eaves into the same warped basin. As you rise and dress, something feels different. Not outside, inside. A weight behind your ribs. A pressure building like a storm in your chest. You try to name it, but no word fits exactly. It's not fear, not grief, not even despair. Just a tightness. You step into the cold morning air, hoping the walk will help. The streets are damp and empty. Even the baker's oven hasn't started puffing yet. You head toward the fields, the dew soaking your boots. At the far edge of the village, you spot a figure ahead. Familiar gait, familiar hunch. It's Agnes. Or it would be if Agnes hadn't vanished years ago. But this woman looks just like her. Same long stride, same thick braid, same long coat, patched with faded blue thread. She's moving quickly away from the village. You follow without fully deciding to. She leads you past the orchards, past the old windmill, up into a small clearing surrounded by gnarled trees. There in the middle is a circle of stones carefully arranged, smoothed by years of weather and touch. She kneels inside them and begins placing something on each stone. Small objects, bones, berries, feathers, shards of coloured glass. You don't speak, you just watch. Eventually she turns. Her face is lined but kind. She doesn't seem surprised to see you. Sometimes she says the womb wanders. You blink confused. She chuckles softly. That's what they used to say. That when a woman acted strangely too weepy, too angry, too quiet, it was because her womb had gone astray, floating around inside her like a lost animal. It sounds ridiculous, and yet she says it without mockery. In the Middle Ages, female mental illness was often explained through the concept of hysteria, a word derived from the Greek hystera, meaning womb. Many believed the uterus could detach and wander the body, causing madness, choking tremors, or fainting. Treatments varied from herbal fumigations to massages, often deeply invasive, sometimes deeply harmful. You sit beside her on a damp stone. She offers you a blackberry, even though it's not the season for them. It's soft and warm. Impossible. You eat it anyway. Agnes or not. Agnes speaks gently, rhythmically, like someone reciting lines from memory. She tells you of other women, those who were burned, those who were buried, those who were simply forgotten, their stories lost under layers of soot and scripture. The world isn't built for women who feel too much, she says. So they gave us new names. Witch, temptress, lunatic. Scholars still debate whether hysteria was a catch-all for all female disobedience, or whether it reflected genuine attempts to explain mental illness with the medical tools of the time. Either way, the result was often the same dismissal. Women were told their suffering came from their womb, their blood, their sins. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The clearing smells of wet bark, crushed moss, and faint smoke. When you open them again, she's gone. You look around, but there's no sign of her. No footprints. The circle of stones is still there, but the objects she laid down are gone too. Just empty stones now slick with dew. You walk slowly back to the village, dazed. In the square, a new proclamation has been nailed to the church door. You step closer to read it. It's a warning against female agitation, signed by the bishop himself. Any woman found speaking in riddles, disrupting prayer, or neglecting her domestic duties will be brought before the clergy. So it's begun again. That evening you sit by the fire and rub your thumb along the edge of the wax charm. It's cracked now, crumbling at the edges. You think about Breda, about the midwife, who once sang to her herbs, about Agnes and her blackberry. You write their names on a scrap of parchment and hide it beneath your mattress. Tonight you dream of wombs with wings. You wake with the taste of feathers in your mouth. Not real ones, just the idea of them. Light, dry, unnatural. The image of a flying womb still clings to your thoughts like cobwebs you can't shake off. You stretch, shake your head, and stare out the small window as sunlight creeps across the rooftops. The village looks the same, but something about it feels off-axis. As you step into the street, you hear laughter. Not cheerful laughter. Odd halting, rising and falling like a broken tune. It comes from the far end of the square near the smithy. A crowd has gathered, but it's not a festive one. You make your way toward it, heart low in your chest. In the center stands a young man. Thin, mud-streaked, smiling too widely. His eyes are bright, with something you can't name. Joy, terror. He's laughing in bursts, clutching a wooden spoon like a scepter. No one touches him. No one laughs back. They just watch, whisper, step away. Some call him fool-touched. Others say he's blessed. This isn't the first time you've seen someone like him. They appear from time to time, outliers, who for reasons unknown, live in a reality just slightly tilted from the rest of us. And oddly, in some places and moments, they're not punished, they're cherished. Or at least, tolerated. You think of the stories you've heard of village fools, court jesters, wandering madmen believed to be divinely touched. People whose minds worked differently, who couldn't farm, couldn't trade, couldn't pray quite right, but who sometimes saw things others didn't. In some medieval communities, these individuals were given odd freedoms. A fool, especially if he could be made to entertain, might be fed, housed, even protected. He lived on the edge of ridicule and reverence. You remember a tale told by an innkeeper, a man who spoke in riddles and could predict storms. He was barefoot year-round, slept under carts, but was invited to weddings because he always made the bride laugh. He died, choking on a plum pit. They buried him under the orchard unmarked. The young man in front of you waves the spoon again, bows low to a startled pig, and begins to sing. A few children giggle. A woman crosses herself. The blacksmith simply walks away. You stay, and something odd happens. He looks at you, not past you, at you, and for just a moment the wild light in his eyes softens. He gives you a slow nod, like he knows your name. Then the wind picks up and the moment is gone. You spend the rest of the day in a strange fog, thinking about fools and prophets and how often history has confused the two. Were they mad, or just tuned to a different frequency? Scholars remain divided on whether holy fools in medieval Europe were romanticized exceptions or genuinely respected. In Russia, Yurodivy, the holy fool was considered sacred, often walking naked in the snow, speaking in riddles, challenging church authorities. In Western Europe, the line was blurrier, but the trope persisted, the one who, through madness, glimpsed truth. You visit the church again that evening. It's empty. The candles burn low. You walk to the front pew and sit for a long time listening to the creak of wood and the occasional flap of a bird in the rafters. You think about what it would take to live freely as a fool. No shame, no silence, just permission to feel too much, laugh, too loud, say things that don't make sense and be fed anyway. A strange dream in a world that loves order. That night, as you drift into sleep, you hear singing again, not in your dream, but just beyond it. It's the same voice as before, but this time it's singing your name. And when you turn in the dream, the singer is holding a spoon. You rise the next morning with a strange sense of anticipation, like the world is holding its breath. The dreams are still lingering, though hazy now. The image of the spoon, the song, the way your name echoed without lips. You shake it off and step outside into light mist and chimney smoke. You're not sure why, but today feels like a day to visit the physician. He lives on the hill just beyond the tannery, in a squat stone house with slate shingles and a garden that smells like wet garlic and rotting cabbage. He's not a man of smiles. He speaks rarely, and when he does, it sounds like recitation. But the villagers trust him. Sort of. Mostly because they're afraid not to. You knock. He opens. His robes are stained. His hands are red. "I'm not sick," you say quickly. "I just want to understand." He nods once and steps aside. The inside of his home is equal parts library and apothecary. Shelves of leather-bound books stretch above jars of preserved animal parts, dried roots and unlabeled powders. He gestures for you to sit, then returns to a basin where he's busy draining blood from a small twitching chicken. You look away. The smell is coppery and old. He finally speaks. "You want to understand madness." You nod. He doesn't ask for more. Instead, he opens a drawer and pulls out a small, soot-smudged chart, 4 circles overlapping labeled blood phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, the 4 humours. Too much black bile, he says, tapping the darkest circle, brings sorrow. Melancholia. We bleed it out. You raise an eyebrow, and if that doesn't work, he shrugs. Then the bile is stubborn, or the moon is strong, or the soul is cracked. He opens another drawer and produces a tiny jar filled with leeches. They twist slowly in their viscous world. I've placed these on more foreheads than wounds, he mutters. Leeching, the gold standard medieval treatment, not just for fevers and swelling, but for moods, for sadness, for too much thought. Place a leech near the temples, let it feed, and hope it drinks the badness away. Sometimes it even worked temporarily. Mostly it just made the patient dizzy. He shows you another tool, a trepanation knife, small, curved, elegant in a horrifying way. Used, he says, to let the spirits out if they've taken residence in the head. Rare, he adds, but not unheard of. You swallow and glance toward the window. Scholars remain divided on whether physicians believed these methods were truly effective or whether they were simply doing something to fill the void of knowledge. Some treatments were based on observation, others pure tradition. A few were likely desperate guesswork. The physician tells you a story of a nobleman's son brought to him with fits of rage and weeping. No fever, no injury, just chaos. He tried bleeding, fasting, even boiling sage in goat's milk. Nothing helped. Eventually the boy was sent to a monastery. A year later he returned. Silent, peaceful, blank. Was he healed, you ask? The physician just shrugs. He didn't scream anymore. That was enough. You stay a little longer listening to him recite the virtues of vinegar, lavender oil, and crushed pearl. He gives you a small cloth bag of dried hyssop. For clarity, he says. Steep it in wine. Drink it on a moonless night. You thank him, and leave the scent of blood and vinegar clinging to your cloak. As you walk through the village, you see others moving through their own rituals, a woman tying rosemary to her child's belt, a boy whispering a rhyme while touching a stone 4 times, the man with the wooden spoon dancing near the well again, spinning in slow circles as if tracing an invisible pattern only he understands. You reach your room and pour the hyssop into a bowl. It's brittle and sharp, smelling of dust and sunlight. You stare at it, unsure whether to brew it or bury it. That night you drink it cold, and sleep comes fast. This time your dream is inside the physician's home, but everything is upside down. The jars are floating, the leeches sing, and you are sitting in the chair holding the trepanation blade. The room spins, but you never fall. The hyssop lingers. You feel it the next morning, not in your stomach, but somewhere behind your eyes. A clarity, yes, but also a weight. As if your thoughts have been restitched loosely, and the seams haven't quite settled. You move slowly, aware of each joint and sound. The village seems louder, not in volume, but in presence. You pass the chapel and notice the door is bolted shut. Not locked, bolted. That's new. A sign is tacked on private prayers today. No admittance. You glance at the windows. No candlelight. Just shadows. You wonder who's inside. Willem is still missing. At the square, a group gathers near the blacksmith's, not for his wares, but for something else. A wooden cart sits nearby. Inside it, something wrapped in linen. You get close enough to hear the words healer binding kept safe. They've restrained someone. A girl this time, not breeder, not familiar. She's young, maybe 15, wrists bound with rope, but not cruelly. A priest walks ahead of her reading a passage from Psalms. Her eyes are wide, but unfocused, like she's watching something behind your shoulder. No one protests, no one cheers. Just murmurs of blessing her, curing her, protecting us. You follow the cart at a distance down a narrow path behind the church, where an old house sits half sunk into the earth. They call it the quiet cell. It's used for solitude, or penance, or exorcism. The definitions blur depending on who's speaking. You don't stay long. The girl begins to hum a sound so gentle it feels like glass being stroked. You leave before they close the door behind her. And yet, not everyone in the village uses rope and scripture. You remember a small stone cottage on the edge of the woods, half hidden under creeping ivy and the faint scent of elderflower. You visit the woman there, an herbalist they call her, though not quite with affection. Her cottage smells better than the physician's, less vinegar, more warmth, beeswax and mint. She greets you without surprise and sets a kettle on the fire. She doesn't ask your name, just says, "You've seen too much lately." You don't argue. She places herbs in a bowl, passion flower, valerian, poppy seed, mullein. "For softness," she murmurs, and forgetting. Then separately she pulls a red sachet from a high shelf, tied with a black thread. "This," she says, "is for when softness won't do." You don't open it. You don't want to know. In many medieval households, folk healing existed alongside church cures. Women like her treated melancholia, hysteria, and night terrors with touch, warmth, story, and sleep. They were called witches as often as they were called wise. Some were midwives, others widows, many burned. Scholars still debate how effective their methods truly were, or whether their greatest power was simply being willing to listen. In a world of chains and chants, offering tea and silence could be revolutionary. You sip the infusion she gives you. It tastes like old flowers and fresh rain. Your hands go warm, your feet relax in your shoes. She doesn't speak again until you're halfway through. Sometimes she says softly, "We don't need to be cured. We just need not to be feared." You don't respond, but you feel your throat tighten. You leave with the sachet in your pocket, though it feels heavier than it should. That night you lie awake, the red sachet tucked under your pillow, its scent seeping into your dreams before they even begin. You expect something vivid, but instead you dream only of silence, not the heavy kind. The kind that listens back. The weather shifts again, this time toward unease. A wind has picked up one that moves through the village like it's looking for something. It pushes open shutters, knocks over baskets, turns cloaks inside out. You step outside into its chill and immediately sense it's not just cold, it's a kind of warning. Even the animals seem to know. The chickens refuse to wander, the dogs whine and hide under carts. And then you hear it. A scream. Not far, not loud, but real. You follow it down past the mill through the cluster of homes by the stream. There a woman kneels in the dirt outside her door, gripping a torn shift, her hair wild and loose. Her mouth is open, but no sound comes out now. She's shaking, clawing at the ground. Around her neighbors keep their distance. You don't know her name. Someone mutters. Another one. Another what? Another soul lost. Another storm in a person's head. A priest soon arrives, murmuring prayers, and a strong-armed boy carries the woman away as she gasps and twitches. One of her shoes remains behind, flung in the rush. You pick it up without thinking. Back in the square, the mood has turned solemn. The butcher closes early. The tavern keeps its shutters drawn. Even the juggler doesn't appear tonight. It's as if something has swept through, something everyone feels but refuses to name. You sit near the fountain, watching the water slosh irregularly in the wind. No sign of Willem. The girl from the quiet cell is still locked away. Breda's stall remains empty. And suddenly, you remember the tales about night terrors. Not just bad dreams, but dreams that touched the waking world. In the Middle Ages, such episodes were often blamed on demons, succubi, incubi, or lesser spirits known to sit on a sleeper's chest, pressing the breath from them. The medical explanation was irrelevant. What mattered was that the terror was real. You've felt it yourself. That moment in the dark, half awake, when the room is wrong, when you're sure something's in the corner, when your chest won't rise and your thoughts come in a flood of impossible logic. Medieval physicians had terms: incubus, oppression, nocturnal visitations, hag riding. Treatments varied: blessed herbs tucked under pillows, holy water sprinkled across sheets, knives placed under the bed to cut the demon's grasp. You wonder how many people simply stopped sleeping. Scholars remain divided on whether these experiences were neurological, psychological, or cultural. A mix of sleep, paralysis, trauma, and the power of stories. But to the sufferers, the cause didn't matter. Only the terror did. That night, you prepare for sleep with care. You sprinkle some of the herb, woman's powder, near the hearth. You place the sachet under your pillow again. You even leave the window cracked, so nothing is forced to enter. But still it comes. Not a figure, not a sound, just a feeling. You're dreaming, but not deeply. The room looks exactly as it does when you're awake. Same shadows, same ceiling beams, same low firelight. But you're not alone. There's something watching. You feel it just outside the corner of your vision. You can't move, can't speak. The weight on your chest builds. You remember what the herb woman said: when softness won't do. With every scrap of will you can gather in this dream, you reach under the pillow and clutch the sachet. It burns your palm, and then it ends. You wake with your sheets tangled, your hair damp. The sachet is in your hand. You don't remember grabbing it. You place it on the table where it leaves a faint red mark on the wood. You sit there for a long time, staring out the window, waiting for the sun to rise. But you feel somehow that it already has. The next morning arrives with a brightness that feels unearned. The sky is clear, the clouds soft and slow-moving, but the village feels wary of the sun, as if it's a visitor rather than a friend. You step out into this strange calm, with the sachet still on your table, its red stain seeping into the wood grain like blood into cloth. You walk slowly through the square, watching people move with just a bit more caution. No laughter, no bells, even the fountain seems to gurgle more quietly today. Then, as you pass the baker's stall, you hear the whispers. "He's gone," someone murmurs. The king. Mad, they say. Locked in the tower now. You turn casually, trying not to seem too eager. A group of men in dusty cloaks huddle together, passing news like contraband. The story is fuzzy, second-hand, maybe third, but the gist is this. The king has fallen into madness. He raves at night. He strikes at shadows. He speaks to birds. He laughs during council. They've confined him. Quietly, politely, royal dignity and all that. And just like that, the conversation shifts. Not about the king, but about madness in noble blood. You've heard the stories before. The lineages cursed with instability. The queen who once sang lullabies to a stone. The prince who refused to wear clothes for a year. The duchess who believed her mirror was whispering sins. In medieval Europe, when a ruler lost their mind, it wasn't just tragic, it was dangerous. Power rested on order. If the one in charge unraveled, the whole kingdom trembled. Some were hidden, others were poisoned. Some, like Charles VI of France, who believed he was made of glass, were simply endured. You think about that, being powerful enough to go mad and still be protected, still fed, still dressed in velvet, still addressed as Your Grace, even as you scream at your own reflection. The contrast is sharp. Breeder hums in a stone room. The girl from yesterday sobs in a goat barn. But a king gets silk restraints and carefully worded letters. Experts still debate how much of what was recorded as royal madness was true mental illness, political fabrication, or a mix of both. When you wear a crown, every twitch becomes symbolic, every silence suspect. You walk past the priest's house and notice something else. The tower bell rope has been cut, not cleanly, frayed at the end. You don't ask, you just notice. Back in your room, you sit and think about power, how it shields, how it exposes. You think about what happens when the mind breaks and everyone's watching. You pull out the wax charm again. It's shriveled now like a dried fig. You consider melting it down, but something in you resists. Maybe it's become your crown in a way. Not golden, but proof that you still have something holding your edges together. That night the dreams return, but they're lavish. You are in a palace. Marble halls, gilded doors. You wear robes stitched with symbols that keep shifting as you look at them. Courtiers kneel, nod, disappear when you blink. But the mirrors don't lie. In them your reflection weeps. You touch your face in the dream, and your hands come away with gold dust and blood. A voice behind you whispers, "Your Majesty, it's time." You wake with tears on your cheeks, and the faintest taste of honey. And for the first time in days, the birds sing. Today the village seems gripped by stillness again, but not the kind you've grown used to. This stillness is brittle like ice, too thin to trust. Every sound feels loud, the flap of a linen sheet on a line, the clop of a hoof on stone, a cough echoing through an alley. You wander down to the square, not sure what you're looking for. Then you hear it sobbing, not from the church, not from the market, but from behind the baker's house in the alley where firewood and broken carts go to die. A man stands there alone, shoulders heaving, hands over his face. No one else is near. You recognize him faintly. A mason, quiet, strong, known for building the new well cover last spring. He weeps like a child now, not out of shame, but out of emptiness. You know that sound. The kind of crying that happens after everything else has failed. You approach cautiously. He doesn't look up, doesn't flinch, just mutters between breaths. "Can't stop, can't stop. Everything's wrong. You sit on the ground beside him. You say nothing. You don't need to. This isn't madness, not possession, not sin. This is something else. Something we'd call a breakdown now, but here it has no name. Eventually his sobs quiet. He sits beside you in silence. The sky turns from grey to pale gold, and still neither of you move. You think of the times you've cried like that, when the weight inside you had nowhere to go and spilled out through your eyes. In the Middle Ages, strong emotions, especially uncontrollable, laughter or sobbing were often seen as omens or signs of divine interference. A person overtaken by joy or grief was said to be visited. Visited by what? That depended on who you asked. Some said angels. Others said devils. A few believed the soul simply opened too wide, and something slipped in or out. Scholars remain divided on how such emotional outbursts were interpreted across different regions and classes. In some monastic records, such episodes were seen as holy experiences, visions, or revelations. In secular spaces, they were feared, tolerated, suppressed. As the man stands and finally walks away, his steps slow but steadier, you wonder what will happen next for him. Will he be sent to the priest, the healer, the field house, or will they just leave him to weather it alone? You walk past the tavern later that day and hear laughter. At first it shocks you, then it unsettles you. A woman inside is laughing uncontrollably, gasping between cackles, tears on her face. A man nearby stares unmoving. No one else laughs with her. It's not joy. It's something else raw, tangled too much. The barkeep quietly leads her out. Not by force, but like one might guide a sleepwalker. Her laughter continues, echoing down the street, long after she's gone. And suddenly you remember an old phrase, weeping like Mary, laughing like a devil. Back in your room, you sit with the silence again. Your red sachet still sits on the table, its scent faded but still clinging. You take out your old journal, just a few scraps of parchment, and write 2 words, "Still here." You fold it and place it under the sachet, as if giving it an offering. That night you don't dream. You lie awake instead, and listen to the wind brushing past your window like a long, low sigh. And somehow it feels like an answer. You awaken to something unfamiliar birdsong. Not the scattered squawk of village crows, or the shrill cry of nesting gulls, but true song. Clear, melodic, impossibly layered. You sit up slowly listening. It sounds like a choir hidden in the trees. You step outside and discover why. A pilgrim procession has arrived. They've come from the east, their boots caked in red clay, their robes damp with dew, their eyes shining with exhaustion and faith. They walk slowly, quietly murmuring chants in unison. Some carry staffs tipped with bells. Others hold up small icons, wooden carvings of saints, cloth-wrapped relics and wax-sealed prayers. They're heading to the shrine of St. Dymphna, a few miles beyond the village, nestled deep in the forest. You've heard of it. Everyone has. It's said to soothe the minds of the troubled. They say the mad walk into the woods raving and return whispering peace. You fall in beside the procession unnoticed. The rhythm of their walking, their soft voices, the scent of frankincense from a censer swinging at the front, it all lulls you into a kind of waking dream. St. Dymphna, the patroness of mental affliction. According to legend, she fled her father, who'd gone mad after her mother's death. When he caught her, he killed her in a rage. Over time, those who suffered madness began to visit her resting place, believing her spirit offered clarity and healing. Was it true? Hard to say. But what is true here and now is that dozens of people, pilgrims, sufferers, family members, believe enough to walk for weeks toward her name. You speak with one woman along the way. Her daughter, she says, has fallen silent. Won't speak, won't eat, just stares. They tried everything, priests, charms, even leeches. Nothing helped. But maybe the saint will, she says, her voice cracking. Maybe she'll listen. It strikes you that hope in this world is a treatment all its own. Scholars still debate whether pilgrimage was an act of piety or desperation. Perhaps both. For many, it was the only option left, a way to reclaim dignity, even if the cure never came. You reach the shrine by dusk. It's modest, just a stone arch with ivy creeping across it, a fountain beside it with a trickle of spring water. People kneel and press their foreheads to the stone. Others dip cloths into the fountain and wring them out over their loved ones' heads. The air smells of damp leaves and candle wax. You sit nearby and watch. One boy begins to hum a tune you don't recognize, but it stirs something deep. The same kind of tune Breeder used to hum. The same softness, the same note that seems to come from before language. And for a brief moment, the entire clearing feels suspended, like time has forgotten to move forward. You close your eyes and feel the tears come slow and honest. It's not a breakdown. It's not a possession. It's not a wandering womb or an imbalance of bile. It's grief. It's exhaustion. It's being human, and here at least for a moment that's allowed. As the sun dips below the trees, you dip your fingers into the fountain. The water is cold, but soft like silk. You whisper no prayer, but you leave behind your red sachet, setting it gently at the base of the shrine. Someone else might need it more. You walk back with the last of the pilgrims, the sky darkening above, stars beginning to emerge one by one, and for the first time in many nights, when you close your eyes, there is no weight, only space. The return to the village is quiet. After the shrine, everything feels a bit softer, like the edges of the world have been sanded down. The air smells cleaner, the wind less intrusive. Even the cobbled streets, usually so eager to jab your feet through your thin boots, seem to welcome you back. But not everything is different. The chapel is still shuttered, Breeder's mother's stall still empty, the quiet cell still locked. Life has resumed, not healed. You pass the herb cellar. She gives you a look, eyes narrowing slightly, then nods once. Not quite approval, but something like recognition. You suppose she knows where you've been. The smell of frankincense always lingers longer than you'd like. You sit near the fountain. Still no Willem. A few children are skipping stones nearby, whispering a rhyme you don't recognize. Something about mirrors and fire and sleeping minds that never wake. It's unsettling. But then again, many nursery rhymes are, if you actually listen to them. The day drifts by like smoke. Around midday, you hear the call of a travelling bard setting up outside the tavern. He's young with a dented lute and a voice too polished for a village this small. He begins to play. At first the song seems innocent, about a maiden in a tower, a night with too many thoughts. But then the words shift. The maiden begins to speak in dreams. The night stops sleeping. A mirror cracks and the sky bleeds stars. It's not a love story. It's a story about madness, told like a fairy tale. People gather. Some smile, others frown. A few shift uncomfortably. In medieval times, such songs weren't rare. Troubadours often carried tales of tragedy, of saints and sinners, and those who saw too much. Sometimes the mad were cast as villains, other times as prophets. A few became heroes. Scholars remain divided on whether these songs reflected public belief or simply entertained by playing on fear. But either way, the stories shaped how people saw themselves and those who strayed from the norm. You listen until the end, then toss a coin at the bard's feet. He bows dramatically, then sings a final verse. To think too long is to walk alone where saints won't speak and gods won't own. So sing your thoughts while thoughts are free, or lock your mind and lose your key. It's a catchy rhyme. You hum it to yourself as you wander toward the edge of town. You visit the old orchard again. The trees are mostly bare now, their fruit gone or rotted branches clawing at the air like they want to escape the ground. In the distance you hear church bells, not from your chapel but from another village. That's when you see her, the girl from the quiet cell. She's standing near the far fence, barefoot, cloak flapping in the breeze. Her hands are empty, her eyes clear, not blank, not wild present. You don't approach, you just watch. She turns slowly, looks at the orchard, then at the sky. Then she hums, just once, a single note, and walks back toward the village. No one stops her. Maybe they've decided she's no longer dangerous. Maybe they're too tired. Or maybe she's not returning to them. She's returning to herself. You sit there until dusk. When you return to your room, you find a scrap of parchment tucked under your door. No name, no handwriting you recognize. Just 5 words, still here. So are you. You smile. Fold the note. Place it beside your journal. That night you sleep soundly. Not dreamlessly, but softly. You dream of walking a path alone, yes, but the sun is warm, and the birds are singing again. The village wakes slowly the next morning, as if unsure whether it should. There's no fog, no wind, no birdsong, just a stillness that feels not threatening but watchful. You step outside with cautious ease, half expecting the world to tilt again. But it doesn't. You make your way toward the herb, Seller's hut drawn not by need but curiosity. The bundle you left behind at the shrine, it's changed something in you. You feel lighter. Yes, but also uncertain. Who are you now? Without the worry curled tightly inside your chest. She greets you before you even knock. Something's shifted, she says, her eyes sharp. You let go of something. You nod. I don't miss it. She smiles faintly. Most don't. Until it comes back dressed as something else. Inside the air is warm with rosemary and thyme. You sit as she grinds dried fennel seeds with the flat of a spoon. A pot simmers near the hearth. Did I ever tell you? She says, about the ones who come back from the edge. You shake your head. They're never quite the same, she continues. Not broken, not whole, just rewired. You ask her what she means. She leans forward. There are those who return not just healed but gifted, and she taps her temple. Their pain becomes insight. They hear what others don't, see what others won't. You pause. Prophets. Sometimes, other times just. The only honest voice in a room. This was a common medieval belief that some forms of madness were doorways, that once you passed through and returned you were changed, touched by something divine or cursed. It depended on how you wore it. Some of the most famous mystics, Julian of Norwich, Marjorie Kempe, Joan of Arc, claimed visions, voices, and overwhelming emotions. They were often dismissed, feared, even tried for heresy. But many were also revered. Their suffering in time became sacred. You ask the herb woman if she's ever seen someone truly gifted. She laughs not unkindly. You're sitting in my hut, aren't you? You blink, then chuckle, then nod. Before you leave, she hands you a new sachet. This one is blue, wrapped in soft cloth, tied with silver thread. For remembering, she says. Not protection, not silence. This one's for clarity. You walk with it in your palm for a long time, before tucking it into your belt. It feels lighter than the red one, less like armor, more like a key. In the village news spreads of a wandering teacher approaching from the south, a man said to calm the minds of the agitated, not with prayers or leeches but with stories. People say he speaks gently, that he carries no tools, just a walking stick and a memory sharp as flint. You sit in the tavern that evening listening to the rumours swirl. A man at the next table says his uncle was cured just by listening. A story someone scoffs. Yes, the man insists. He listened, then slept, and when he woke, the screaming stopped. They all go quiet after that. You sip your drink feeling the sachet warm against your hip. That night you write a story. You're not sure why. You just begin scratching into parchment with a piece of coal. A tale about a girl who hums, riddles a boy with 2 bundles, a king of glass. The lines come easily. The rhythm's familiar. When you pause, you realize you've heard these characters before. They've lived with you. Maybe you're finally ready to let them speak. You leave the parchment folded on your windowsill just in case the wind wants to read it. And that night, your dream is simple. You're sitting in the herb woman's hut, but this time you're the one grinding seeds. And someone else, face unknown, sits across from you, asking what to do when the silence becomes too loud. You smile and say, "Tell me a story." You rise with a sense of readiness. There's no panic, no fog, no shadow clinging to your bones. Just the gentle certainty that something is waiting, something quiet, but real. You dress slowly, tie the blue sachet to your belt, and step outside into crisp morning air. The village is awake today, not bustling but breathing. Smoke curls from chimneys. The blacksmith hammers slow and steady. A child chases a rooster. Life, messy, loud, imperfect, is happening. You walk toward the market, not because you need anything, but because today feels like a day to watch. There, near the herb, seller's booth, you find a group of men arguing not loudly but intensely. At the center is a grey-haired man in scholar's robes. He holds a scroll, gesturing toward it, face flushed with passion. I tell you, he insists this is not madness. It is perception heightened, not broken. One of the villagers' arms crossed replies, and yet she walks the street at night, shouting at ghosts. And what if the ghosts are real? The scholar says, almost laughing. You smile despite yourself. Apparently word has spread of the new debate whether those called mad are actually cursed, gifted, or simply different. The scholar reads aloud from his scroll, quoting classical texts. mentions Aristotle, Galen, Hildegard. The villagers shift uncomfortably. One woman says, "All I know is my sister started talking to the stars and stopped eating." Another adds, "My brother heard voices, told us to leave the house." That night the chimney collapsed. Silence. Scholars remain divided then and now on whether mental divergence is sickness or sensitivity. In some texts it is treated with scorn, in others with reverence, but always there is this tension. Is the mad person broken, or seeing what the rest of us cannot? You think of Breda of her rhymes that seemed like nonsense until they weren't. You think of the girl in the goat barn who wept until the full moon, of the boy with the bundles, of Agnes and her stones, of yourself folded around quietness, daring to speak again. You step forward and ask the scholar gently, "What if it's both?" He blinks. "What broken and gifted," you say. "Isn't that what glass is when it catches the sun?" He looks at you for a long moment, then slowly nods. "Perhaps," he says, "perhaps the shatter lets the light in." You leave. Before the argument resumes, the point has been made, or at least planted. That afternoon you visit the chapel again. The doors are open. Inside the priest kneels, not praying but writing. You approach quietly, and he looks up. His face is tired, but not hard. He gestures for you to sit beside him. "There's been a lot of confusion," he says after a moment. "Fear, noise. But I've been thinking, perhaps we've mistaken suffering for evil." You nod. He hands you a small book, unbound pages, uneven ink. "Stories," he says. "Confessions, visions, dreams. I started collecting them. To understand." You flip through. Some are names you know. Others faces and voices you've never met, but recognize instantly. You give him your folded parchment, the one you wrote the night before. "Add this," you say. He takes it with care. "Thank you." As you leave, you hear him whisper, "We must stop burning the messages just because we fear the messenger." That night you sit at your window and watch the moon rise. It's full again, round clear, no longer a threat. And below it by the fountain, you see Willem. He's returned. He holds a bundle in each hand, rocking them slowly. But now he's not humming to them. He's singing. Words. Not nonsense. A lullaby. People gather unsure whether to join or flee. But then a child begins to hum along, and another, and then it's music. You rest your head against the sill. Tonight you don't need a charm. You have a song. You wake to the sound of footsteps below your window, slow, deliberate, measured. Not the shuffle of villagers going about chores, but something more formal. You peek out and spot a procession. Not pilgrims this time. Clerics, scholars, scribes. They're here for a gathering called by the bishop himself. A symposium, they say, to address the state of minds in distress. A scroll had been sent out weeks ago. You learn, though, the villagers only now hear of it. Representatives from surrounding towns, monasteries, and even 2 physicians are expected to debate whether madness is a spiritual corruption, a bodily imbalance, or simply something else. You sit on a barrel near the church and watch as they arrive. Men in long robes, women in veils, a handful of laypeople trailing behind, clutching tablets and ink. It's surreal. The same village that chained a humming girl now welcomes men who write papers on melancholy in Latin. The chapel is swept clean, candles lit, the doors left open. You drift inside and sit near the back unnoticed. The bishop stands first, his voice echoing. "We meet today not to judge," he says, "but to learn. The soul is a deep forest. Let us not pretend we've mapped its trees." Polite nods follow. Then the talks begin. One scholar insists, madness stems from sin, pride, gluttony, lust, envy, that which decays the soul from within. He quotes scripture, raises his hands. Some nod, others frown. Another responds with the humoral theory imbalances of bile and blood. He speaks of digestion, of planetary influence, of leech placement. More nods. Someone mentions moon cycles. But then a monk stands, an old one, with a slight tremor in his hand. He clears his throat. "There is a boy in my abbey," he says, "who walks the cloisters backwards and names each stone. He does not speak to people. But one day he wept at a sparrow's death and sang a hymn he'd never been taught. He's not broken. He's not cursed. He's just not like us." Silence. Not out of shock, out of recognition. You realize something they're all trying. Not all successfully, not all kindly, but they are trying to redefine what has no name in their language. They don't have mental health. They don't say neurodivergent or trauma-informed or spectrum. They say afflicted, touched, melancholic, fire-hearted, moon-called. But they're looking, and that matters. Scholars remain divided, yes, but moments like this hint at evolution, a shift, not a cure, not an answer, but curiosity. During a break, you step outside. The herb seller stands near the chapel steps, listening from a distance. She doesn't go in, but she nods when you pass. You meet one of the scribes, a young woman, with ink-stained sleeves. She asks if you've known anyone touched by sorrow. You pause, then say, "All of us." That night there's a meal shared in the square bread beans stew and sweet cider. The scholars mingle with villagers. You hear debates over juniper smoke versus fasting. Someone brings out a harp. Then, without warning, Brida's voice rises from the edge of the gathering. She sings not the riddled humming of before, but a full song. Words in old dialect. Haunting, beautiful. Everyone freezes. And then someone joins in. A second voice. Then a third. It becomes a chorus. The bishop closes his eyes. The herb woman clutches her chest. The baker begins to weep. You stand at the edge of the firelight hand on the blue sachet and understand the answer was never in the scrolls or the smoke or the cells. It was here in the listening, in letting the brokenness have its voice. The morning after the gathering feels like the village has exhaled for the first time in weeks. There's no fanfare, no formal announcements, no holy proclamations, but you sense it in the way the air moves through the streets, the way neighbours speak to each other a little softer, a little longer. Even the chickens seem less chaotic today. You rise slowly sore in all the joints that carried so many heavy thoughts. But it's a clean kind of soreness earned. You step outside and see something unexpected. Willem sitting by the fountain, his 2 cloth bundles laid gently on the stone beside him. He's no longer rocking, no longer humming, just sitting, present. People walk by nodding. No one looks away. One woman even leaves a small crust of bread without being asked. You pass the chapel and see the doors wide open. Inside, the priest sits not at the altar, but among the pews listening to an elderly man talk about how his wife used to hear voices when the harvest was bad. He's not ashamed, just tired. The priest just listens. No blessings, no chalk, no salt, just presence. You spend the afternoon walking through the places that once felt haunted. The orchard, Agnes's cottage, the cell behind the chapel, the windmill. They're still empty, still worn by time and memory, but they don't carry the same fear now. Not for you. It's strange, isn't it? How fear transforms spaces, gives them shape, weight, teeth. But when you walk through those same places again, with understanding they soften. They become part of the world again instead of something just outside it. You stop by the herb, woman's hut one last time. She's sitting on the steps sorting dried thistle into neat little bunches. "Still here," she says without looking up. You nod. She hands you a small bundle. "For travel." You blink. Travel. She finally meets your eyes. "You're not meant to stay here forever, are you?" You hadn't thought about that. But now, it feels true. Not because you're running, but because you've gathered something worth sharing. You pack that evening your blue sachet, your parchment, your pen, a piece of rosemary. You don't take the charm. You don't need it now. As the sky darkens, the villagers gather again this time, not for fear or debate, but for rest. The bard returns, singing a new story, this one softer. A tale of someone who wandered far, met voices in the woods, and returned not with gold, but with clarity. And in the crowd, Breda sings again. She finishes her song, and then for the first time speaks. Just one sentence. "I feel like I've woken up." And with that, the crowd doesn't cheer. It doesn't gasp. It just nods. You sleep that night on your cot one final time. The dreams come again, but now they are yours. Not invasions, not messages, just reflections. You are in the forest. The moon glows like a watchful eye. You sit at the base of a tree and hum a lullaby you didn't know you knew. And someone, perhaps the girl, perhaps yourself, sings with you. The sound isn't lonely anymore. It's home. And now as the last flicker of candlelight fades and the village sinks into its deep medieval hush, You rest your head on a pillow, woven with 100 whispered names. You've walked far tonight, not in leagues but in time, through misty fields, silent chapels, smoky herb huts, and the aching corners of the mind that most never dare to name. You've felt the heaviness of misunderstanding, the sting of labels whispered in fear, but you've also seen glimmers of grace, of those who listen, those who carry, those who hum quietly beside us in the dark. You are not alone in your wandering. You never were. The wind outside shifts softer now, as if brushing the edges of your thoughts. It carries the scent of dried rosemary and morning bread. You imagine the girl Breda sleeping peacefully, a song still echoing in her mind. You picture Willem by the fountain smiling, with no reason other than peace. You think of yourself stronger now, not because you were cured, but because you were witnessed. Your breath slows. Your thoughts loosen. The night does not ask you for answers anymore. It only asks that you rest, that you soften, that you allow the world to hold you for a while. And so, dear traveller, may your sleep tonight be light, deep and free. End of script. Sweet dreams.